Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something pretty fascinating. Jury selection. Specifically, the very first days of the process in a really high-profile federal sex crimes trial. You know, the significant ties to the entertainment world.
Right.
We're not naming the individual, but what's happening in that courtroom, the questions, the answers, it gives you this incredible behind-the-scenes look.
It really does. It tells you a lot about the case itself, even this early.
Exactly. We've been following the details coming out, and our aim today is really just to unpack what these initial steps tell us about the whole thing, especially finding an impartial jury.
And it's striking right away, isn't it, just how intense the vetting is for these potential jurors.
Yeah.
It's not just ticking boxes. Both sides are really digging deep, looking for any hint of bias, any life experience that might, sway things.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get into that. The level of detail is pretty amazing. They're asking people really directly about their personal histories, experiences with sexual assault, harassment, domestic violence. Not just them, but family, friends. Even if they or someone close were ever accused, that's heavy stuff.
It is, and it signals just how central those themes are going to be.
Right.
The lawyers, they need to understand the emotional terrain of who they might be talking to. If you've had direct experience, it could shape how you see the evidence, right?
It makes sense. They need to know if that perspective makes someone unable to be objective.
Exactly. Can they set it aside? That's the key question.
And it's not just past events, is it? Now it's also about your digital life.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
They're asking about opinions expressed online about the defendant, social media posts, things you've liked, your whole sort of digital trail. How big a factor is that now?
It's huge. And it's getting more critical all the time. Public opinion, especially online, it can create this powerful background noise. The defense obviously wants anyone out who's already sounded off negatively. The prosecution needs people who can ignore all that online chatter and just focus on the courtroom evidence.
Yeah, it really shows how hard it must be to find people who haven't been exposed to a big case like this.
It's a major challenge.
We're also hearing about questions on how they feel about law enforcement.
Right.
And any past dealings with government agencies. That feels like it could uncover, well, very different kinds of potential bias.
Totally. If you've had bad run-ins with the police, you might be more skeptical of the prosecution's case, which, relies a lot on police work. But on the flip side, the prosecution might worry that someone who really trusts law enforcement might just automatically believe their side. It's a tricky balance for everyone.
Now, some questions seem a bit, well, less expected. The defense seems particularly interested in musical tastes, hip-hop rap specifically.
Yeah, that one's interesting.
And even asking about openness to, I think they called it alternative sexual lifestyles.
Right.
That last one really makes you wonder about their strategy. What can we read into those?
Well, the music thing. Maybe it's about cultural attitudes, stereotypes. Its direct link isn't immediately obvious. But the alternative sexual lifestyles question, that strongly suggests a potential defense angle. Like, they might be trying to frame the alleged events as part of a consensual, if maybe unconventional, sex life.
Ah, okay.
So finding out where jurors stand on that, spectrum of views could be really important for them. They might want people who are less likely to see certain behaviors as automatically criminal.
Right. It brings up how society's views on sex might clash with legal definitions of consent.
Exactly.
We're also getting some fascinating stories about how specific people are handled. Like, there was one man who admitted to several past issues with police, including assaulting an officer.
Wow.
Prosecution was obviously worried about bias. But the defense argued he could be fair, and the judge actually let him move forward. What does that tell us?
It really highlights the judge's power here, doesn't it, as the gatekeeper of impartiality.
Yeah.
Despite a history that looks problematic on paper, the judge must have believed the guy when he said he could be unbiased. It shows they trust jurors, to some extent, to self-assess.
So a past record doesn't automatically boot you out?
Apparently not. If the judge thinks enough time's passed or the situation's different enough.
Then there was the airline pilot. An American Airlines pilot, worried about being biased against the defendant because of the music and LA lifestyle, plus knowing about the allegations already.
Right.
And the judge basically said, look, it's a high-profile case. Almost everyone's heard something. That's telling, too.
It is. It's a recognition that in today's media world, complete ignorance just isn't realistic for these big cases.
So the question isn't, have you heard of it?
No, it's, can you put what you've heard aside and judge fairly based only on the evidence shown in court? That's the standard. The judge seems focused on that openness.
We also saw someone dismissed for recent marijuana use, which apparently got a bit of a wry comment from the defense table.
Huh, okay.
And another woman excused because she was expressing a lot of anxiety, Catholic guilt about making such a big decision. Plus, she had stomach issues needing frequent breaks. It makes it very human.
It really does. Jury duty is serious business, and you see the real personal stuff people bring. The anxiety, the health concerns. The court has to weigh all that.
It's almost funny. In a way, someone else got dismissed for reading a news article about the jury selection itself.
Right. That shows how much they want to keep the jurors in a bubble, focused only on the courtroom.
No outside info allowed, even about the process they're in.
Exactly. It could subtly influence them, even unintentionally.
Then there's the woman who'd survived an attempted rape. She said she distrusted law enforcement and worried the defendant's wealth could skew things.
Yeah, that's a tough combination for the court.
Her dismissal seems almost inevitable with those factors, doesn't it?
It does. Distrust of police could bias her against the prosecution, and the wealth comment raises doubts about seeing both sides equally. Very difficult hurdles.
And then there's the video. That video. The one supposedly showing the defendant assaulting a former girlfriend. It keeps coming up.
Unavoidable, it seems.
Several potential jurors mentioned seeing it. One called it damning gone.
Yeah, clearly prejudged.
There was also an HBO employee who said it was disturbing, but claimed she could be impartial. Defense wasn't happy, though, because HBO made a documentary about the defendant.
Ah, that's a tricky one. Even if she thinks she can be impartial, the connection to her employer who produced something critical, it creates at least the appearance of a potential issue.
Understandable concern from the defense. It really shows the difficulty of managing all the pretrial stuff that's out there, especially something visual like a video.
Absolutely. How do you find people who haven't seen it or formed strong opinions already? It's a huge challenge.
But then, interestingly, a woman who'd liked a social media joke mentioning baby oil and the defendant, she got to stay, even though later reports mentioned large amounts of baby oil and lubricant found at his properties.
That is interesting.
Seems like a fine line they're drawing.
It does. Maybe they felt liking a joke is different from, say, writing a post calling him guilty. Less active judgment.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't automatically mean she can't weigh the actual evidence fairly later.
Could be. It suggests they're looking at the degree of expressed opinion.
What's really coming through, though, is just the sheer variety of people in this pool. Different ages, jobs, pilots, social workers, different places they get their news, different music tastes, a real mix.
Yeah, a slice of the community.
But we heard that on the first day, out of nearly 40 people questioned, only 16 moved forward. That's a lot getting cut.
It is. That rate really tells you how careful both sides are being. Especially in a case like this, with so much public interest and potential for strong feelings.
They're really scrutinizing everyone.
Definitely. They want to weed out anyone they think might lean the other way. It also shows just how much time and effort goes into seating a jury for a complex trial.
Shifting gears a bit, these early stages are also giving us clues about the legal strategies, right?
Sure.
That defense interest in alternative sexual lifestyles we talked about seems like a big hint.
Suggests they'll argue consent within perhaps an unconventional context.
And we know the defense tried hard to keep that video out, argued it wasn't accurate or authentic.
Right. They clearly see it as very damaging, trying to undermine its credibility from the start.
But the prosecution won that fight, didn't they? And they even got permission to show it slowed down.
Yeah, which suggests they plan to make it a central, powerful piece of evidence. Slowing it down would likely be to emphasize specific actions. This whole fight over the video feels really key.
It does. And we also saw the prosecution really zeroing in on any potential bias against law enforcement.
Makes sense. Their case probably leans heavily on police work, investigations.
While the defense is worried about the opposite jurors coming in already knowing too much, maybe having negative views of the defendant already.
These are pretty standard worries in criminal trials, but like everything else here, they're amplified because it's such a public case.
Trying to level the playing field somehow.
As much as possible, yeah.
It was also interesting that prospective jurors were shown this long list, like over 100 names and places, celebrities, people who've sued the defendant civilly before, including that former girlfriend from the video and another woman who alleged groping and threats. The judge clarified they aren't necessarily part of these charges, but still showing the names.
That list is like a potential map of the case's wider world. By showing those names, they're checking if jurors recognize them, if they have opinions already.
Ah, I see.
It suggests that even though the trial's about specific federal charges, the jury might hear about this broader network of people and prior allegations. Gives context.
And we touched on the core claims, too. Prosecution talking about forced participation in freak-offs, these alleged drug-fueled sexual encounters.
Right.
And the defense countering that it was all consensual, part of a swinger's lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fundamental clash, isn't it?
Absolutely. Consent versus coercion. That'll be central.
And the mention of a psychiatrist who might testify for the defense about drug effects. That really points to them challenging consent, maybe arguing about impaired capacity.
Exactly. That's a clear sign they'll likely argue the drugs affected people's perceptions, maybe their ability to consent freely. It sets up a big fight over what consent means when substances are involved.
And finally, just remembering the stakes. Serious federal charges, sex crimes, trafficking, potential for a very long prison sentence if there's a conviction.
Huge stakes.
And the jury, whoever they end up being, will be anonymous, which says a lot about the sensitivity and pressure here.
It does. Anonymity underscores the high profile, the potential for outside pressure, or even threats. It's meant to shield the jurors, let them focus just on the evidence, ensure the process is fair.
Beyond all the legal stuff, you also get these little human moments, don't you? Reports describing the defendant in court sometimes nervous, sometimes smiling or hugging his lawyers.
Yeah, those details.
And the judge actively questioning, making these tough calls on who stays and who goes. You just feel the weight of it all.
Absolutely. It's easy to forget these are real people in a really intense situation. The body language, the interactions, it reminds you of the personal pressure involved as they build this foundation for the trial.
So wrapping up our deep dive for today, we've seen this incredibly detailed probing of potential jurors. It's revealed this huge range of backgrounds, life experiences, even like what they like online.
A real snapshot.
And we've gotten some pretty strong hints about the legal strategies coming down the pike, especially around key evidence like that video.
Definitely. Early clues are often quite telling.
And it's clear, even without naming names or specific news outlets, that these first few days alone tell you a lot about the allegations and just how complicated this case is going to be.
What's really fascinating is how this part of the process, jury selection, which sometimes gets overlooked, is actually such a powerful window into the whole trial's dynamics.
Yeah.
Who gets picked, who gets dismissed. These aren't random choices. They're strategic moves that shape the entire case.
Which leaves you, the listener, with something to think about. Seeing this process up close, what does it really tell us about trying to find an impartial jury in these huge, media-saturated cases?
Especially with sensitive allegations involved.
Right. In a world where everyone's seen something online, how much does that prior knowledge or your own personal history truly affect your ability to be fair? It's a tough question, one that sticks with you. Thanks for digging into this with us today.